Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them. Villains. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons is a game of high adventure. Exploring ruins and robbing evil temples is fun, but eventually your players will want more. And rightly so. As a dungeon master, it is your job to plan the campaign. The campaign, if you're not aware, is a series of adventures all linked together to culminate in one final objective. A big part of your campaign is the adversaries you send to face the player characters. Random encounters and wandering monsters can only take you so far. The plot of your campaign will dictate the types of villains you need to create to send against your heroes. Every story needs a bad guy, and that bad guy has to fit the story. Whenever I'm making a campaign, designing a long-term situation, and I want bad guys, I use three main types of villains, and this is how I list them. Other people have different ideas, and I would suggest looking up different people's ideas. There's a guy, How to Be a Great GM. He does good videos on this as well, so don't just take my word for it. Go with these other people as well. Do as much research as you can on this. Again, I use three main types of villains: lackeys, henchmen, and masterminds. Lackeys are the nameless peon foot soldiers which swell the ranks of your villain's forces. In the James Bond, these are all the James Bond movies. These are all the thugs that run around. The workers at the evil guy's lair or whatever. These are the foot soldiers, essentially. Henchmen are the servitors and bodyguards, the lieutenants, as it were, that the mastermind employs as elite forces to perform specific functions. These are much more capable. Excuse me. Drinking coffee there. These are much more capable. They command a lot of the lackeys. This would be like, in James Bond, it would be like Odd Job or Jaws. Those guys, the assassins, the guys who perform specific functions. Masterminds are the world-class villains that employ the henchmen and the lackeys. They may lead a secret society, or they may just be exceedingly wealthy, or just have resources. These are the Bond villains who employ Odd Job and Jaws, the henchmen. I like using these three types because it tailors the encounters to your players as they rise in level. At low levels, your player characters can slaughter hordes of lackeys with minimal danger to the characters. At first level, there's a lot of danger. But as they go up in level, these lackeys really aren't going to provide a lot of challenge, and rightly so. This allows them to earn experience and become more powerful so as to draw out the campaign until they can face a henchman. During the course of all this, you can drop hints of something larger, but nothing specific, and don't let them get a hold of anything that they can actually investigate. That's the main thing. At least nothing major. When your players reach sixth level or so, throw a henchman at them as well as the company of lackeys. This tells the players that they have garnered the attention of the lackey's boss, and he considers them a threat to some degree. This impresses on them that something larger is afoot and wants to get them to investigate. When your players reach 10th to 12th level, that's when you let slip, through the course of the game, of course, that there's a mastermind controlling the actions of the henchmen and the lackeys. They then must discover the ultimate goal and motive of that mastermind. Now, what I just gave you was an example of how you could do it, and there's tons of different ways to do it. All this being said, the creation of these villains requires thought and planning. Lackeys are disposable bad guys. They need to be plentiful and 0 to 1 hit die, that kind of thing. Essentially, they're stormtroopers. From Star Wars, they're stormtroopers. Henchmen are powerful foes, slightly more powerful than half of your party of PCs. If you have 6 sixth-level player characters, Your henchmen should be about 12th to 14th level. The player character should be able to kill them, but not easily. He should be able to escape fairly easily and be as terrifying as possible. These guys are the sledgehammers the mastermind employs to strike fear into the player characters. Think Darth Vader. That's what this guy, the henchmen are like Darth Vader. Masterminds are the planners and spy masters who are striving to implement their master plan. Think Palpatine from Star Wars. Now, motivation is one of the most important aspects of any villain. Lackeys are easy. They're either paid or cowed to serve the mastermind. The mastermind could conscript peasants, hire mercenaries, or acquire the services of orcs or goblins. Regardless, these guys follow orders and rarely deviate except to retreat when the odds are against them. Any grand motivations that they may have are put on the back burner because they're in service as lackeys. Henchmen are employed by the mastermind for a reason. They could be paid, they could owe a debt, they could have religious, social, or familial connection, or whatever. Regardless of the reason, this guy is a true believer. He believes in the cause, whatever that cause is. Now, he may or may not be loyal to the mastermind. He may be plotting to overthrow the mastermind, but is biding his time, waiting for the right moment to sink the knife. They may or may not feel justified in their actions, so that they may not see themselves as villains. He may be acting for the greater good, as it were, but he is loyal to the cause. Now, the cause for him may be money. Good mercenaries, you get what you pay for, kind of thing. You never know. But the variety of henchmen, there's tons of different types of henchmen. You just got to figure out which one works best for your game. Masterminds, again, are the Blofelds, the Dr. Evils, the Palpatines, the Machiavellis. These are the guys who enact the master plan and employ everyone under them. They either have to have powerful magic or items that allow them to do massive damage. They have to fit the bill. Palpatine was not a wimp. They have to be able to, summon demons or other creatures or for whatever reason, however you design this guy, he has to be able to fight the group. Okay? And there's lots of ways that you could do that. For example, I ran a campaign one time where they were fighting an evil temple. The evil cleric ran the temple. He was a high-level cleric. I forget what god it was. But he had 6 or 8 paladins working for him as henchmen. These guys were evil paladins. There was a plethora of fighters and other worshippers that wanted to. They were loyal members of this temple, this church, but it was an evil temple, and the group was trying to overthrow this temple. So you had your lackeys with the fighters and the peasants, the worshippers. You had the evil paladins who were the henchmen. These paladins could command groups of the lackeys. And these paladins, they believed, they were real true believers. They weren't being paid. They believed in their god. Okay? And then you had the high cleric, and they had other clerics as well that used as servants, but the high cleric was the one running the show. And he didn't have a hell of a lot of clerics with him. He had a lot of evil paladins, but not a lot of clerics. But the point being, that was how I organized it, and it worked well. That campaign ran for about 4 years. So, there are some things to consider when you're designing villains. Tailor your villains to your players. You know your players. Some players are more cerebral than others. And this is a bad example, but it's the only one I could think of. Pitting a Machiavelli against a group of Dumb and Dumbers is not going to go well. Unless you're planning a comedic type campaign, it's not going to go well. Your players have to be equal to the task of investigating the mastermind's actions to discover and thwart his plans. If the plan is so far beyond the players that they have problems figuring out that there actually is a plan and a master villain, then you've overplanned. I've done this before, and it requires drastic measures to put the players on track. It's better not to overmatch them at all. You want to challenge them without overmatching them. There is a fine line there. I was running a campaign. As a matter of fact, I ran a campaign for 14 years. They had completed one major part of the campaign, and there was a side thing that they were doing, and this major villain, the mastermind, was using the group to find specific items. These specific items, because he was lying to them, obviously, but they didn't know that. This group was finding these special items for him. He was along with the group, and they trusted him. He kept going off by himself, and they'd go to find him, and he's just fought this major battle, and they'd have to come in and help, and blah, 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 blah. And it went on like this for several game sessions. The group got pissed because this guy wasn't... They felt like he was leading him by the nose, but they felt like they were supposed to follow him. And I kept trying to... You can't come out and say, no, he's the bad guy, you give it... But they weren't getting the hint. And I was dropping lots of hints. Oh my God, lots of hints. So finally, they were angry and decided they wanted to do something else. And I said, okay, fine. We'll do something else, no problem. But there I overplanned, and I overestimated the players. And that was my fault, not theirs. So there is a fine line there. The motivations of your henchmen and masterminds fall into one of 4 categories: power, revenge, wealth, and status. And I watched a video a few months ago. I want to say it was How to Be a Better GM. He does a lot of great stuff. Check him out. And he lists these 4 and 2 others I noted. So keep that in mind. Henchmen, for whatever reason, believe that serving the mastermind will help them achieve their motive or their goal or whatever. Masterminds are the driven non-player characters who envision and hatch plans to gain power, wealth, or status, or to exact revenge. They employ henchmen and lackeys as part of that plan. The plan is the key, because the plan dictates what kind of henchmen you're going to have. Unless your players are extremely mature, I highly recommend that none of your player characters be allowed to identify with or sympathize with the villain. If the heroes join the villains, it will be very detrimental to your campaign. Just saying. Try to keep it as straightforward as possible. Confusion is something you really want to avoid, and that was one of the things that got me in that campaign I just talked about. Players cannot wait to argue with you, and one good argument, valid or not, can end your game. Some of my epic fails over the years. My lackeys attacked my 6 third-level players. What should have been a straightforward battle. The lackeys were distracting the group so that one of them could steal an item from the PC camp. 9 fumbles over 2 combat rounds left the entire group dead. It was a total party kill, and it ended the campaign. Another time, my henchman had the group pretty well defeated until the wizard hit him with a charm spell. 1 failed savings throw, and he was spilling his guts to every question they asked. He revealed the entire plan. It was... Now, when stuff like that happens, if you can somehow work out a way where he either dies or gets away or whatever, or the charm spell doesn't exactly work right, whatever you do, plan for a charm spell. That's all I'm saying. because I couldn't think of a way, given the circumstances, I couldn't think of a way out of this for this guy. And he just told him everything. After that, I had to fast track the players on a number of side adventures to get them high enough in level where they could do what they needed to do the campaign. It just didn't end the campaign, but it required some quick thinking on my part. Another time, my mastermind spent over a year in game time embedding himself into the player character group as an NPC asset. He used the group to call off his enemies and collect MacGuffins. This is the time I was telling you about earlier, and then it deteriorated from there. Another time, my mastermind, when the group found out what the main plan was, and they started making plans to go after this mastermind, apparently they had collected a number of MacGuffins, and the assassin in the group decided it was better not to go after this mastermind. This is one of the times where he identified with the mastermind. He sympathized with him and wanted to join. The assassin in the group murdered everyone in their sleep. He took all the MacGuffins for himself. He went and joined the mastermind. That was the end of the game. And they never knew. The group never knew. They never had a chance. They never knew he was going to do that. And it surprised me as well. So, yeah, when you plan your villains, make sure there's a clear distinction between the players and the villains. If they start sympathizing with him, yeah, that's going to cause problems. I didn't mean for the video to go so long, but villains require some thought. Don't just, throw a guy in there. If you do, leave a lot of it open so you can come in and fill in the stuff later. You know what I'm saying? Villain ideas. One of the most important parts of any campaign is the villain. I've done videos on the different types of villains and what they bring to your game. I've done suggestions on different villain types to use in specific scenarios and situations. The choice of villains, their backstory, their place in the world, etc. These are all important in the grand scheme of your campaign. But which villains to run? What kind of villains? What would be appropriate for your game? The choices are vast and almost limitless. Let's narrow them down a little bit. I like to look at the type of civilizations in the world. City-states are generally less advanced than nations, much as a BC Iron Age or Bronze Age people are less advanced than medieval people. Okay? So it just depends on the kind of campaign that you have. A less advanced villain, an ancient cult or a barbarian horde, for example, will either need to remain hidden within the realm or position themselves someplace remote and secluded from the realm. They have to be either... The way barbarians survive is they're not in the realm. Cults would have to hide within the realm. If a cult becomes big enough and people know about it, and it's opposed to the general, what do you call it, the established religions in the kingdom, yeah, it generally doesn't last. So cults are probably going to have to remain hidden, like a secret society kind of thing. A more advanced villain can be a secret society hidden within the realm or one of the ruling elites of the realm. One of these things, what I'm talking about here, you got to realize there's a lot of overlap. Okay? Examples of less advanced villains could be, for example, the cult of Rakonkar, a spider cult with lots of secret spies feeding info to the secret hideout. The cult of Boar, a bear cult who sacrifices humans by tying them to a pole in front of a giant cave bear's den. The cult of Canis, a cult of assassins worshipping a cat god. A barbarian horde, as I said. Things like that. the cult of an evil deity whose followers take over a city for the human so they can have plenty of people for human sacrifice. A group of pirates, slavers. Although in less advanced areas, slavers are going to need some political allies. Slavery either has to be legal, meaning there's slave pits and there's auctions and things like that, or it's going to have to be slavery from another kingdom, and people here are capturing people to go over there to sell them, that kind of thing. Examples of more advanced villains could be, for example, the evil duke who seeks to overthrow the wise and good king. I did videos on coups and rebellions. Go check that one out. An evil wizard seeking to find an artifact which will allow him to control a powerful monster or demon. A king corrupted by an evil cleric seeking to turn the realm into a theocracy dedicated to that evil deity. An evil political figure using a network of spies and assassins trying to turn over the rule of the realm to a hostile neighboring kingdom. An evil wizard with spies and other operatives within the realm in high areas who seeks to rule the world. You see what I'm saying? There's lots of varieties. There's lots of different things that you can do. In my game, I run a mix of all of the above. I usually have 4 to 6 major kingdoms, at least one large empire made up of several smaller conquered kingdoms, and 12 to 24 city-states in the fringe areas. I set up the general basic governments and resources along with a rundown of the major and minor political figures, as well as their military types and strengths. A mountainous region probably wouldn't have a lot of cavalry. A coastal region is going to need a navy, that kind of thing. But don't forget those unexplored wilderness areas. Got to have those. Otherwise, what's the point? Your guys have to, your players have to go your players have to have a place to go and explore. If it's all explored, what's the point? But then, city adventures can be fun too. Especially if they get thumped by the guards for a crime they didn't commit, they have to escape, and that's always fun too. I mean, there's literally the variety of adventures in Dungeons and Dragons is literally limitless. I mean, it's you can do literally anything, and I mean that literally. I said that a lot, didn't I? Anyway, after I get all that done, then I set up a few dozen villains throughout the land, usually at least 2 per kingdom and city-state, and at least 4 per empire. These can be any of the ones I listed above or whatever else I fancy. I make sure to write out the major figures in each, their motive and purpose, their size, their general armament and funding, and their overall organization. Using this basic format, I'm ready for whatever direction my players decide to go. I've talked about this before. I learned this lesson the 3rd time I set up the adventure to the north and my players headed south. That is, I hate it when that happens, but that's very, very common in Dungeons and Dragons. You sit for 3 months and you plan out this wonderful game. It's got the underground and with the drow and the orcs up above and blah 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 blah. You got the whole thing mapped out. You've got everything set for them ready to go explore. And it's the entrance is south of the kingdom, and of course the first thing they do is go north. No matter what clues or whatever you give them, there could be an army of rampaging barbarians being led by an ancient huge black dragon to the north, but damn it, they're headed that way. Using my format, you start them somewhere in the middle. There's an adventure any direction they go. This format not only gives an abundance of villains to choose from, but it also allows you to adjust the level of the villains to tailor them to your group of player characters, because the more your players adventure, the higher level they'll get. That's the general theory. And so if you set up all your stuff as 3rd level bad guys, and then they get to be 9th level, bad guys are pretty pitiful, pretty chintzy. So yeah, you have to be able to adjust your bad guys. That's all I'm saying. Now keep in mind, I'm not trying to tell anyone how to run their game. All I'm doing is trying to share my wealth of experience with those newer dungeon masters. Feel free to use, abuse, change, or ignore anything I tell you. And remember, if your players are having fun, you're doing it right. That's the only main rule. The primary rule. If your players are having fun, you're on the money. Right there. Running a game is a labor of love. And the more prep you do ahead of time means less ad-libbing and improv you have to do during the game. When I set up a campaign, there's a lot of work involved. I have, right now, 4 maps drawn out. I have cities. I have kingdoms. I have city, states, and kingdoms. I have I have at least one empire, and I have a bunch of unexplored territory on each map. All I have to do is insert villains. Yeah, this game is in my blood, and I will never stop playing. I'm going to be in a nursing home in my 90s, getting the other residents to play. One of the things many players and dungeon masters, for that matter, fail to take into account is the weather. Weather is a huge factor when determining the equipment that you should buy. I have lost count of the number of dungeon masters who ignore the weather in their worlds. Spring, summer, winter, and autumn all require different preparatory equipment purchases. I have lost count of the number of players who do not ask what the season or the weather is before they purchase their equipment. The Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide has an entire section devoted to weather and its effects. If you do not have that book, I highly recommend you get it. That tome is a wealth of information. In cold weather, extra blankets and furs are a must. The group might even consider pooling their resources to get a tent. Some other things to consider. Padded armor gives the same armor class as leather armor, but it is much warmer. Cold weather and very cold weather clothing, like bear furs, actually make the armor class better. Go check out my video, Budget Cloak of Protection. Also check out Armor Warmth in the Wilderness Survival Guide. Your armor can help keep you warm. In the desert, armor is not really a good thing to wear because you'll burn up. In the wintertime, just saying. Flasks of oil can be used to help light fires. Torches and lanterns all put off heat. Cloaks and robes will help you keep warm. And heavy cloaks can even be worn over armor, so you can combine them. Iron rations with water can be boiled into a soup, which is much more nutritious. Soup in cold environments helps to keep your core temperature up. Okay. A tinderbox with flint and steel is very useful because in AD&D matches do not exist. I think in later versions of Dungeons and Dragons they have tinder twigs, I think they're called. My son has the books, but in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons they don't exist. So, groups of player characters with spellcasters should coordinate so that more than one spellcaster has some fire-producing spells, prepared just in case of emergencies. You got to get that fire going quick. Okay, burning hands. Psh, that's nice. Or flame finger or something like that. You can even use cantrips for that. It's quite nice. Don't forget water and grain for your mounts. If you're going to buy a horse, it's got to eat. If you're traveling through a blizzard, the horse has to eat. I'm just saying. Now, let's converse and flip it over to hot weather. Hot weather, extra water skins and shade is a must. A group tent might be in order to help with shade. Some other things to consider. Wearing armor in the heat of the day is detrimental to a player character's health. One must weigh the need for armor versus the heat index. See the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide It's all in there. That book is a godsend. For more details regarding armor in the heat, you got to check out that book. Traveling at night might be better than braving the heat of the day. Animals such as horses and mules require more water than humans, roughly 10 to 13 gallons per day. Remember, these loyal critters sweat just like you do. In hot, arid areas, grass may be in short supply, so grain and extra water for your mounts will probably be in order. Following rivers and streams and planning your route to hit known and reliable water holes is a definite must. Usually, trade routes take advantage of those. A trade route along a river, and then it'll branch off to go to this lake, and then up to that water hole, and blah, 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 blah. Trade routes are usually a good way to do it because they're established routes with known water holes. That's always good. But if you're going to brave a desert, you better make sure you got enough water because that'll kill you quick because any monster will. I cannot stress enough the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide. As a dungeon master, it helps you to make your game much more realistic. As a player, it will literally increase your chances of survival versus the elements. Remember, the weather can be as dangerous as any monster, so plan ahead and be prepared. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. That's pretty much it right there. Anybody who's had any survival training, yeah, try to transfer that into Dungeons and Dragons and help out your fellow players. Because I've played in groups where one guy is well prepared and he's got all the stuff he needs, but he never mentioned it to the other players, and suddenly he's the only one with extra water, or he's the only one with cold weather clothing. You know what I'm saying? You have to stop every couple hours and light a fire. It's crazy. My contention is, as a group, the players need to work together. That's the whole point. They're a team. If they're not doing that, their chances of survival are a lot less. And in harsh climates, hot or cold, yeah, it becomes a necessity. That's all I'm saying. Weather can be your friend or your enemy. Mother Nature. As a dungeon master, it's your job to create maps. Maps of the area, maps of the continent, maps of the nations, maps of the cities, maps of the islands, maps of the dungeons. There's a lot of maps in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It would behoove you to learn a little bit about the various types of terrain, weather, distance and scale, etc. You know, basic cartography. One book I can never ever recommend enough is the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Wilderness Survival Guide. In that book is a wealth of information on a wide range of topics, all of which will help you design your world. As a matter of fact, on page 103 is a section titled Starting from Scratch. And that's literally what it is, world building. Directly after that, there's an appendix which talks about weather. The book primarily illustrates how weather impacts the game, but it doesn't explain the meteorology, how weather happens. This is important to understand if you're designing a world. Basic meteorology is determined by the seasons, and the seasons are determined by the tilt of the planet and the sun, and you know there's a lot of different factors, but the seasons are what your players are primarily going to be worried about. Mountaintops are cold in the winter, and they're cold all the time pretty much, but in the winter that's where the snow collects. When the snow melts, the water runs downhill, creating streams, rivers, and lakes. That usually happens in spring. The summer heats up the land. Warm air rises, cool air descends, creating wind. You have two areas, Area A and Area B. Area A is warm, the air heats up and rises, leaving a void. The air from nearby Area B rushes in to fill said void, creating wind. The rising warm air brings the humidity up into the sky, creating clouds. When the water cools, it creates rain. When autumn comes, that rain becomes snow because it's cold. This is, of course, an overly simplified rundown of meteorology, but you get the idea. You might want to look into some of that stuff, learn about it. Basic physics, basic meteorology, basic hydrodynamics, basic laws of thermodynamics, You don't have to be a PhD expert in these various fields, but understanding the natural laws that govern a world will help you to create a world governed by those laws. That way, when something unusual or abnormal or paranormal, outright weird happens, magic, somebody casts a magic spell, for example, you can describe it with the proper nuance. If the natural laws apply in your world, it makes the magic and anomalous events that much more pronounced. Now, monsters and magic are cool, but one of the things that many uh, dungeon masters overlook is bad weather. For those of you who scoff at bad weather, I gotta say, you're being stupid. If you've ever been camping and the weather turned quickly, you probably piled into the car to wait it out or even packed up everything and left. Imagine there's no place to pile into, or no place to wait it out, or no car to drive out of the situation. Imagine there's no shelter. Imagine there's no convenience store to head to. Imagine there's no phones to call for help. Imagine there's no search and rescue responders or helicopters. Imagine you have to travel from point A to point B and it's a several week trip. There's no highway, but only a rough trail. There's no law enforcement that patrols that trail. You have to plan for every contingency and bring along anything you may need. There's no weather station or weather apps to warn you of weather ahead of time. Tornadoes, blizzards, torrential rain, flash floods, earthquakes, droughts, hailstorms, and the like are deadly enough in our modern world. Imagine how deadly they would be if there was no warning. Wildfires are common in nature as well. Lightning can start a fire, and next thing you know, you're running through the trees trying to escape a fire. And then, of course, there's the normal animals and predators, because that's part of nature as well. One of the things that people don't tend to think about are the other travelers. Maybe they're down on their luck and need your food or your horses or your gear. Maybe they're just evil and they want your stuff. Maybe they ran into bad weather and lost their stuff. Who knows? And that's just the normal stuff. I didn't talk about the monsters, which roam most advanced Dungeons and Dragons worlds. Any way you want to look at it, Mother Nature's a bitch, and she's a merciless bitch to boot. Mother Nature has a field where she grows the fuck she gives about PCs, and her field is not only barren, but it's been salted and covered with a thick layer of lye. Mother Nature don't give no fucks. She don't give no fucks at all. Play her accordingly. Now, I'm not saying every time they venture out, they get hit with a blizzard and a tornado, but a little bad weather keeps them honest. That's all I'm saying. Oh, I hope you enjoy running Dungeons and Dragons as much as I do, and I try to make my world as grounded as possible, so that when abnormal stuff happens, it's more pronounced. You know, if you're fighting off some wolves and some guy runs up and casts a fireball at you, yeah, that's a big change of pace. You see what I'm saying? Um, if everything in your world is magical, then nothing is special. For those of you who don't know, the companies who put out these tabletop role-playing games also put out pre-made adventures called modules. Modules are self-contained adventures requiring little or no work from the game master in order to run. All you have to do is read through the module several times before running it so that you're familiar with it, and they're really, really great. You go to the store, you find the module, you read the back, make sure it's going to fit into your campaign, or make sure it's something you want to run with your players, because you know your players better than anybody else, right? And so you buy the adventure, you buy the module, you take it home, open it up, read through it, become familiar with it from beginning to end. Make sure everything is right. Then you can run the adventure. And you can tweak them a little bit too. You don't have to run it exactly by the adventure module. You can tweak them and add a monster here, take away this monster, boost that monster, tweak that monster just a little bit. Oh, that guy's sword's going to be too powerful. We'll drop it a little bit, that kind of thing. But there is a downside to these modules, and I want to explain this ahead of time. Because these modules are available at stores, anyone can buy one. Also, sometimes they are left unsupervised at the store without a plastic wrap. So somebody's taking them out of the plastic to look inside, and they decide they don't want it, they put it back on the shelf. And the people at the store, they want to sell the module, so they leave it up there. Well, anybody can go by and look at it. That's the downside to a module. Years ago, I needed an adventure for my group to play while I worked on the main campaign. And for those of you who don't know, the campaign is the main storyline. Your player started at first level over here or whatever level, and they had this huge mission to do, and between sections of this campaign, they can go on little side missions or spend downtime in town, you know, go to the local shop and buy more items or better weapons or armor, you know, whatever. And I needed an adventure to fill that little gap. So I bought a module from one of the local gaming stores, and I set it up for our regular game night. I was ready to go. We started playing, and everything seemed good. And there was one player. The guy's name was Roger. He's a good guy, real good guy, but just annoying. Everybody has them, those annoying friends, you know. All right. They're going into this adventure, it's a little underground thing, and the third room, my friend Roger, he leaned over to the group leader and says, "Hey, don't go in there. There's a troll hiding behind the door." And I said, "How the hell did you know that?" He goes, "Oh, I read the module at the store." So, no problem. So, what I did is I said, 15-minute break. Well, we just started. Yeah, 15-minute break. Picked up my stuff. I went in the other room. And I sat down and I tweaked this module. I changed a bunch of it. So when I come back and sat down, Roger didn't know as much as he thought he knew. He knew a little bit here and there, but for some reason it didn't quite end up how he thought it was going to end. Roger wasn't happy. But Roger had a lot more fun because he didn't know what was going on. It was a mystery to solve. There was adventure because he didn't know what was around the corner. You see? The problem with modules is anybody can read them. That's what I don't like about them. But if you're a starting game master, you can grab some modules and maybe, you know, tweak them a little bit and add them to your campaign, and they work out good for learning how to be a game master. They work out real good for that. Just make sure nobody's read them before you before you run them. That's the main thing. Okay. So at the end of that game, as I recall, Roger had to make up a new character because his dude died. But that's okay.
At some point in your campaign, your player characters will want to put together an army for whatever reason. They want to man a fortress, execute a coup or a rebellion, because I did a video on that. Rebellions and coups, I think I called it. They want to organize a defense against foreign invaders or whatever. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons. But for whatever reason, they want to make an army. They're getting people in. The very first thing you got to do with any army, training is essential. The player character should be able to train their men to some degree, or they should hire mercenaries who can do the training for them. Either way, a trained fighter can make use of virtually anything in order to get better equipment. Modern day survivalists, I've heard them say, you know, if you have a brick, you can get a gun in an apocalyptic type situation. A brick will get you a gun. All you got to do is use it properly. A trained fighter can do that. You want to give your army the best equipment you can on the budget that you have. So here we go. Equipping an army is an expensive affair. More than likely, the player characters will need to fund this equipment out of their own pockets, and they will want the best bang for their buck. I put together this chart to help you organize this army into a manageable infantry cohort. And I'm only doing infantry. Teaching people how to fight from horseback, like a trained knight or a horseman, is difficult. There are cultures in the world, the Mongols, the Sioux, the Sioux Indians, the American Indians, are another. The Native Americans are another good example. There are cultures, the medieval knights, for example, trained from birth to fight from horseback. And, amen on that. If you don't have access to that, you want the best infantry you can get. Infantry can defeat cavalry. Here we go. Generally, archers would make up about 20% of the force. Flights of arrows will thin the ranks of the opposition. That's always useful. Light infantry would make up about half of the force, 50%. Heavy infantry would be about 25% of the force, and elite infantry would make up the last 5%. That's the way I organized it. It's much more simple than what's described in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But again, if you're on a budget, you want to keep it simple. Now, for the purposes of this, each man in your army has to have the best equipment. So each man is going to be issued a tinderbox, a flask of oil, because he's got to oil his armor and his weapons to keep them from rusting. He's going to have a week's worth of iron rations, a water skin, a blanket, a leather backpack to carry all of his stuff in, and a knife. For those of you who don't understand the difference there, a knife is different than a dagger. A knife can be used in combat, yes. A dagger is better because it's actually designed for combat. A knife is a utilitarian tool designed for survival situations, for skinning animals, that kind of thing. You can cut your food with it. You can skin an animal. You can again use it as a weapon. So it's a utilitarian thing. Every person should have one. I don't go anywhere without a knife. As for the archers, they're going to make up 20% of your force. Leather armor, short bow, quiver with 12 arrows, a hand axe. They got to have something to fall back on. Now, archers being in the back, they won't require necessarily armor, but I figured in case they have to go into combat, they've got a hand axe and leather armor. They're going to be armor class 8. It costs 33 gold pieces. According to the book prices, it costs 33 gold pieces and 6 silver to outfit each of them. And by the way, I'm not getting into pay either. You know, these, you're going to have, the players are going to figure out how to pay their troops if it becomes a necessity. Light infantry is going to make up half of their group. They're going to have padded armor. I do that for a reason. Padded armor. I gave the archers leather armor because it's easier to work a bow in leather armor. Padded armor is a little heavier. It's also warmer. The light infantry has padded armor, a wooden shield, a spear, and a hand axe. A spear is a useful weapon. It can be used in melee combat as well as a missile weapon if need be. They also have a hand axe to fall back on. They will be armor class 7, and it's going to cost 17 gold and 18 silver to outfit each one. 25 heavy infantry. 25% will be heavy infantry. They're going to need better armor. Scale mail, wooden shield, halberd, hand axe. This gives them a heavier weapon, something with a little oomph to it. They're going to be armor class 5. It costs 66 gold pieces and 18 silver pieces for each of them. As for the elite infantry, these are experienced guys who are force multipliers. These are the guys you're going to put in charge of the other guys. They're going to have splint mail, and by the way, according to the book, whenever you hire mercenaries or acquire men at arms or whatever underlings, you have to outfit them so they show up in clothing. That's it. So the elite infantry, you're going to have splint mail, wooden shield, and 12 gold pieces worth of weapons that they can choose, because being elite, they know what they use best. So 12 gold pieces, they can figure out what they want and get it. They'll be armor class 3. It costs 103 gold pieces and 18 silver to outfit them. As I said, All these prices and exchange rates are as per the player's handbook, and outfitting an army is expensive. For every 100 men in this army, that's 20 archers, 50 light infantry, 25 heavy infantry, and 5 elite, it's going to cost the player characters 3,753 gold to outfit, which is actually pretty fiscally sound. It's pretty cheap comparatively. You could outfit your elite infantry in full plate mail and all that, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. A splint mail and a wooden shield gives pretty much almost the same armor class. So, just that I went with that because it's a lot cheaper. Again, budget army. This force, of course, does not include cavalry or hobilars. This is strictly a foot army, an infantry type thing. A group of 6 player characters can outfit this 100-man force in this manner for a cost of 625.5 gold pieces each. Armies are not cheap, to be sure, but I believe this is an effective force for a reasonable budget. And for every 100, you just multiply, in other words, if you have 100, this is what's going to cost, 3,753 gold. If you have 1,000 men, tack a 0 on the end of that. If you have 10,000 men, tack another 0 on the end of that. Armies are expensive. But this is, in my opinion, a reasonable budget. Now, what you could include, if the players had the money to do it, each man could also be given a potion of healing. As a first aid kit kind of thing. You never know. I'm just saying that's something that could be added later. I did not include it in this because, again, budget army. Healing potions get to be expensive. This can also be used by the Dungeon Master as a force against the player characters as needed. Because the bad guys want to save money too. I'm just saying. No, I don't know too many bad guys who have unlimited budgets. I'm just saying. I hope this helps. And again, I'm not trying to tell people what to do. I'm just trying to give advice and trying to help out the younger, less experienced dungeon masters. And if you don't want to use my advice, amen. The whole point is to have fun, right? Feel free to modify this as desired. Like I said, with adding a healing potion to each person or whatever. You could also, if you wanted to, most military is broken up into small units. And if one person in the unit had the tinderbox, you would only have to, like, for example, you could make every 10th person have a tinderbox. That'll save you a little bit of money. I think pretty much everything else is necessary, but you could also have every other man have a healing potion, that kind of thing. However you want to do it, it's fine. I'm just trying to give you ideas on how to do it cheaply because, again, armies are expensive. And if your player characters are need to have one, yeah, they want to get one out there that's effective but cheap. That cheap and effective is the bane of every military since the dawn of time. If money is no object, you can get whatever you want. If your players are wagon loads of gold with wagon trains full of gold behind them as they go, then yeah, buy whatever they want. But I don't know too many player characters who can do that. Just saying. It's a given in Dungeons and Dragons at some point you're going to have to camp outside. Okay? You're getting from your hometown to wherever the adventure is. You have to travel from point A to point B. Yeah, you're going to have to camp somewhere. When you camp, there are certain protocols that most D&D players abide by. And I'm gonna give you a short list here, and there's more. I'm just trying to give you the basics. But during this time, a lot of stuff can be accomplished at night. For example, training. If you want to learn a new language, if you want to maintain your armor, maintain your weapons, study, that kind of thing. It is a given that at some point you're going to have to stop for the night. You're going to need to organize your sleep arrangements. If an inn is not available, it's always better to stay at an inn.
and pay for the room, even if it's, we're gonna pay a copper piece and all of us sleep in one storeroom in the back, something, anything. It's always better to do that than it is to sleep outside. However, ideally finding a natural shelter, like if the inn is not available, finding a natural shelter like an inn, like a cave or an overhang or old ruins, abandoned ruins. Make sure they're abandoned. You don't want. That's preferable. But if not, you can buy tents. You can make a lean-to. Some kind of a shelter is always good. Especially if the weather looks like it's going to turn. In the summertime, it's not that bad, but unless you're in an area prevalent with mosquitoes, then a tent is a good thing because you can close it off and keep them out. Regardless, some sort of a guard shift must be worked out. And the reason is DMs love, and I speak from experience, dungeon masters love to have monsters attack player characters at night. Dungeon masters are sadists like that. I know, because I am one. There are reasons for this. First off, player characters are asleep, which means they have no armor on, and they are virtually completely vulnerable. Spellcasters need their sleep to memorize or pray or meditate for spells. If they don't get it, they are less effective the next day. If the PCs can be forced to flee, they will leave behind essential gear. I talked about this in a video called Forgetful Much. What happened to all my gear? Well, you retreated from your camp and left it there. I didn't see nobody said nothing about packing up my stuff, that kind of thing. Spellcasters should be the priority to get sleep, especially clerics. You can do without a wizard. A cleric is your healer. Druids as well. They're your healers. You got to have those. Therefore, fighter types and thieves are the primary people to stand watch. If you don't have the numbers to do this, if there's not enough people to have somebody stand watch and get at least, for the non-spellcasters to get at least 6 or 7 hours, a spellcaster can stand watch, but you want to have them at the very beginning or at the very end. And make sure they get at least their 8 hours. And I did, I believe it was one of the rules I ignore videos where I outlined how much sleep spellcasters have to get in order to cast higher level spells. In my games, you get 8 hours and then spend 15 minutes on memorizing spells. It makes everything easier. And I do that for a reason. Go watch that video. Those rules I ignore, I believe there's 3 of them. Go check those out. It was in one of those. If you don't have the numbers, fighters and thieves, enough to allow the spellcasters to sleep straight through, put the spellcasters at the beginning of the shift or at the end of the shift and make sure they're allowed to get their 8 hours. The spellcasters have to have the sleep, and without the clerics, you have no healing. Wizards are important as well, but the clerics, in my opinion, clerics and druids are more important. They have to get their sleep. Any character wanting a decent night's sleep will want to remove their armor. This is something players, oh my god, they ignore. Sleeping in clothing is not comfortable. Anybody who's had to sleep in their suit, in a business suit, or in their BDUs, in their fatigues, yeah, that's not comfortable. Imagine if that clothing was made of plate metal, scale mail, ring mail, or even boiled leather, because that's what leather armor is. They boil the leather and make it rigid. Sleeping in that is ridiculous. You're not going to get any sleep, and oh my god, it sucks. Padded armor might work, maybe hide armor, but it's still going to be uncomfortable as hell. And by the way, also make a note, let your players know that when this is for the dungeon masters, make sure everybody is aware that when they're not wearing their armor class is going to change. Okay, everybody's armor class starts at 10. You subtract the dexterity adjustment, and butt naked, that's your armor class. The armor makes it better. Without the armor, it's stuck there. Okay, same thing when you're asleep. Adverse weather can also affect your characters overnight. Camping time is a good time to maintain your armor, especially in an area where it rains a lot. Oil your weapons. Oil your armor. If you're trying to sleep in a rainstorm and you don't have shelter, that's not going to happen. Okay? Nobody can sleep in a rainstorm without shelter. Nobody can sleep in a blizzard without shelter. Cold fronts, etc., they can prevent you from getting your proper sleep, and without proper sleep, your character will not be as effective. Anytime you can, find shelter, because it's much better. If you can't find shelter, make shelter. It's not difficult to put up a lean-to. It takes about an hour. When the Roman legion would camp for the night, they would make a fortification with ditches and spikes and the whole 9 yards. It was crazy. And they did this every day that they traveled. And so, you know, their sleeping area was fortified. They had posted guards the whole 9 yards. But that was an entire Roman legion. Most player characters won't be able to do that. There is a book out there, and I've talked about it before. It's an AD&D book, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons book, called The Wilderness Survival Guide. You really, really need to get that book if you don't have it. It is invaluable for helping you to navigate the frontier of any world that you find yourself in. If your characters have horses, make sure you have somebody who can take care of them. Some character classes automatically know how to take care of horses. Cavaliers, paladins, you know, people who deal with horseback combat a lot. I allow druids to have the same kind of knowledge of horses because they're druids. They deal with nature. That being said, use common sense. That's your primary thing. And most dungeon masters are pretty lenient when it comes to this kind of thing. You're expected to take your armor off. The problem is, you know, for that aspect of it, the problem is most players forget that they don't have their armor on when they're woke up in the middle of the night with a monster attacking. The wolves are coming. Grab your, you know, they jump up and my armor class is 3. Really? Your dexterity bonus is +7. Really? So just keep that in mind. And there are general protocols a group will get into when they're traveling once the group learns to work together and it works out well. But just keep in mind the basics are important. All right.
Let's get on with this video here. Caravans and expeditions. One of the more prevalent situations in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is when the player characters hire on to a caravan or an expedition. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for over 45 years, and I have literally lost count of the number of times player characters have been hired for such activities. There are distinct differences between caravans and expeditions, and each has their own requirements. In this video, I'm doing land-based trips. I'm not doing ocean voyages. I may do that later if this video's popular. I may do that later. But for this one, it's all land-based. A caravan is usually traveling from one city to another along an established road or trade route. Most likely, the player characters will be hired on as guards. That's pretty common. This means that the caravan operators will most likely provide food and transport, probably riding in carts or wagons. Very rarely are they going to splurge for a horse, an extra horse for, you know, because that's an expense. And if it's a caravan, chances are it's merchants, and merchants are out to make a buck. And if the more they spend on the trip, the less profit they make. And that's the whole point of business, is making profit. The player characters will be expected to defend the caravan against bandits or other threats, and that's their job, right? Since most trade routes follow rivers or regular water holes, water will not usually be an issue. Caravans through the desert, they know where the water holes are, and they're going to pick a route to the city they're heading for that follows those water holes, so water shouldn't be an issue.
Pay or recompense for such a job will not generally be extravagant. As I said, merchants are out to make a profit. The less a penny saved is a penny earned, that kind of thing. An expedition, on the other hand, is a very, very different thing. If the player characters are hired on to guard the expedition, then the situation may be very similar to a caravan. They're there to protect the wagons and such, and, that's that. If the player characters are planning and executing the expedition themselves, many factors will need to be considered. A lot of players buy what they need, what they think they need, and then they just head on out. Each person buys their own stuff, and then they head out. Sometimes that doesn't work. Many factors are going to be many factors are need or let me start that over. Many factors will need to be considered. If the expedition is into unexplored areas, then water, food, and other necessities, I'm tongue-tied today, will need to be brought along. Wagons are going to need to be procured along with draft animals and the means to feed and water them. If the terrain is uncertain, it might be better to purchase a number of pack animals to carry your gear. Either way, it depends on the terrain and the size of the thing. If the expedition is exploratory, then the wagons can be discarded when empty and the excess draft animals slaughtered for food. If the expedition is to retrieve treasure, then the wagons and draft animals will need to be preserved even when the supplies they carry are exhausted. After all, such a treasure, any treasure, big treasure in this game, is sure to be a voluminous amount and will require the empty wagons. Otherwise, what's the point of the expedition? If you're going to get treasure and you don't have the means to bring the treasure back, what's the point? Those wagons are going to come in necessary. You fill the wagons with your supplies. You use, say, hypothetically, you use half of the stuff to get there. Well, half your wagons are empty. You can fill that with treasure and use the rest of the supplies to come back. You see what I'm saying? Hopefully, you'll have enough treasure to make it worthwhile. The supplies in the wagons should contain iron rations, which will last a long time. Standard rations don't last but about a week. Iron rations last a long time, and that would be your preference. You can save a couple of gold pieces by getting a week's worth of rations per person of standard rations and use that first, and then go to the iron rations after. But it's up to you how you want to do it. Just make sure you've got food to feed everybody. That's the main thing. And you can hunt along the way. That's cool. But what if there's nothing to hunt? You're going to need water barrels, oil, extra weapons and ammunition, like spears, arrows, bolts, etc. Whenever I plan an expedition, I always got like 3 extra spears per person in the expedition. Even the magic users and like that, because a magic user, when he runs out of spells, he's still a body. He can pick up a spear and use it. He sucks at it. He's got minuses, but he should have a decent dex for throwing spears. You know what I'm saying? Darts, spears, arrows, that kind of thing. You're going to need tinder boxes, rope, 10-foot poles for checking the ground ahead of the wagons and animals. You don't want to lose critters or wagons in a bog. Sinkholes or whatever. You're going to need sacks for carrying things, because there's always stuff to carry. Worst come to worst, an empty sack can burn. You can burn it. You can use it as a fire starter. Kindling. Lanterns and or torches. Ale or wine to be used as antiseptics and other medical supplies. Painkillers, that kind of thing. You're going to need horse grain to feed the draft animals. Tools, blankets, mirrors, tarps, tents, and any other necessities the player characters may need. Excuse me. Drink of coffee. Also, paper and quill for mapping and charting might be necessary and actually preferable. Let me explain. If you're going to explore an area and you're mapping along the way, that means when you get back, that map is valuable information for the local king or whoever. They don't have to send another expedition to go search that area to explore it, because you already have. That map becomes valuable property you can then sell. You see what I'm saying? And make copies, because everybody's going to want a copy. Don't forget the chests and the crates to contain all of your supplies within the wagons. The last thing you want to do is pile everything in a big pile in your wagon, because then you got to dig through it to find what you need. It's in this chest. There you go. There it is. That kind of thing. Such expeditions are generally quite costly, and it may be necessary to secure the finances of a patron or benefactor for funding. Such a benefactor will undoubtedly demand a stiff percentage of any treasure that you recover. If the expedition is exploratory in nature, several cartographers will be needed to make the maps and such, which will certainly, any benefactor will certainly want. Pay for any hirelings, including the cartographers, will need to be stipulated ahead of time. That's one thing that people don't generally go into. They agree verbally to pay X amount per person. I'm hiring guards at 5 gold or whatever. That's fine. 5 gold a week. Okay, cool. And then at the end of the trip, well, here's your 1 gold per week. Wait, you said 5? No, I didn't. I said 1. You have witnesses? That kind of thing. It's better to get it all in writing and make sure your character has a copy. You got to stipulate all this in writing before anyone is actually hired. Attracting prospective employers might require notices, putting up notices in town, or the hiring of town criers. If you don't know what a town crier is, he walks through the city announcing things. So-and-so is hiring men for an expedition. He wants so many of this and so many of that. He needs cartographers. He needs clerics. He needs this and needs that, that kind of thing. And if interested, inquire at such and such inn, that kind of thing. As you can see, caravans and expeditions are two very different situations. Caravans might be as simple a thing as temporary employment. Expeditions could be temporary employment or a serious investment requiring weeks or even months or years of planning and preparation in game time. As a dungeon master, a serious expedition may very well be the basis of a significant story arc in your campaign. It might even be a reasonable way to gather the player characters into a group to initially start your campaign. There's a lot of ways to do it, and there's a lot of ways not to do it. The trick is to find something that will pique the interest of all of your players' characters. The last thing you want is, you got 6 players, 4 of them are like, yeah, we want to join this caravan to go do this, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be guards and get paid for it. The other 2 go, I don't want to go there. I want to go over here. That kind of thing. It's got to be something they're all interested in, that they will all be motivated to join. Okay? Ocean voyages. I did a video last week on caravans and expeditions. Go and check that one out. This week, I thought I'd discuss some of the dangers and possible precautions one can take when heading out to sea. Some of the obvious dangers are the obvious one, drowning. Being thrown overboard or having to abandon ship into the ocean can be inherently dangerous, especially if you can't swim. Pirates. Thieves on the ocean can be very dangerous because they're maybe they don't just want your goods, because the slave trade in some worlds are very, very popular as well. So they may not just want your stuff. They may want you as well. Sometimes the pirates can even be on your own ship. Check out my video when the entire group is stupid. Yeah, we fell for that one. And it was primarily my fault. I'm going to admit that. The next one is sea monsters and sharks. Anytime you go to sea, these creatures should be at the forefront of your mind. The Dungeons and Dragons, there's a lot of monsters, and if you're on the ocean, that doesn't preclude monsters can't attack you. There are lots of monsters in the ocean, not just sharks. Starvation. If the ship runs out of provisions, or those provisions become tainted or inedible for whatever reason, disease, poison, whatever, this can be devastating, especially if you're 8 months to sea and you've been at sea for 8 months and you run out of provision, 8 weeks or whatever, and you're 3 weeks from port. Yeah, that can be bad, especially if you don't have any drinkable water. That's not a good thing. Dehydration. This may seem weird, but a ship on the ocean, on an ocean full of water, but potable water is a definite concern. So, all right, these are only a few of the many concerns. I tried to concentrate on what I consider to be the major generalized threats
of going to sea on an extended voyage. Now, in that other video, caravans and expeditions, I did. I talked about the reasons people would want to go. You're either hired on or you're forming one. If you're hired onto a caravan or you joined a caravan for protection, that's fine. Maybe you want to explore someplace, that's fine as well. Usually, if you're going to sea, you're either heading someplace or being hired on to protect something. That's pretty much it. It's possible that you own the ship and you want to, become cargo haulers or whatever, or maybe you want to become pirates. Who knows? But for whatever reason, going to sea has some inherent dangers, and that's what we're going to discuss here. Whether you're signing on to be a crew member, booking passage, or whatever, there are some basic steps you can take to improve your chances of survival. First off, do not wear armor heavier than leather. No metal armor. And there's a reason for that. If you go overboard, metal armor will drag you down quicker than anything. It's like strapping an anvil to your feet. It's just not happening. You cannot swim wearing metal armor. Nobody can. It's just not possible. Metal armor is heavy. It will drag you right down into the depths. Buy a cheap set of leather armor if you have to wear armor. If you don't feel right not wearing armor, get you some cheap leather armor. It's better than nothing, and you can swim in it. Okay? Hide armor is not good because it is heavy. Padded armor is not good because once it becomes waterlogged, it becomes heavy. Just like metal armor. So it's got to be leather or less. That's all I'm saying. Make sure your character can swim. That's a very useful skill. Have your character learn to swim. Take the time. Make sure he knows how to swim. If he can't swim, it doesn't matter what he's wearing. Just saying. Number 3, always carry a weapon and never trust anyone not in your own party. Always have a weapon on you. Many ship captains collect up all the weapons and store them. Don't let them do that. If that's going to happen, find a different ship. If the pirates attack, you have to be able to defend yourself. If the crew turns out to be pirates, you really going to need that weapon. That's all I'm saying. Always vet the captain and crew of any ship before you board. That is a necessity. Make sure they have at least a reputation of being honest. They may not be the best crew or the best captain, and they may have, run into a lot of problems, but if they're honest, at least you have a shot at having a fair deal. In that other video, there was another video I talked about just a second ago. When the entire group is stupid. Yeah, I didn't vet the captain and crew very well, not well enough, and it turned out they were pirates. Go check out that video. You'll like it. Yeah, we all died. Number 5, find or create or have someone create an item that purifies food and water. This is always a good idea on sea or on land. Having potable water is nice. The flask of endless water or whatever it is. I did a magic item, something about constant source of water. That's always good. Another thing you might want to look into is a portable distillery. If they have this in your world, if it's available, if you can get one, get it, because at least you can turn seawater using a distillery. You can purify seawater just as well as magic. So, if they're available in your Dungeon Master's world, be sure and get one before you go on the ocean, because that will save your life. Always pack extra iron rations to stow in your gear and in your cabin. The ship generally provides, usually when you board an ocean voyage, they provide the food and water, which is cool, but you never know. It's better to have some and not need it than need some and not have it. It's kind of like wearing a gun and having your concealed carry. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Food's the same way. Number 7, acquire. You're going to love this. Acquire Pardacyrus marmoratus fish. I believe that's how I'll spell it. Pardacchirus, and the second word is marmoratus, Marmoratus, or whatever's equivalent in your Dungeon Master's world. What this is, a natural shark repellent. So if you go overboard, and you have this stuff with you, yeah, the sharks should leave you alone, or at least it'll give you a good chance of them leaving you alone. So those are just some of the things that I can think of. Anything else? Anybody else has any other ideas? Put it in the comments. I'm sure people would love to read them. But yeah, ocean voyages can be just as dangerous as land voyages. Land voyages are a lot more common, but if your player character as a player character, if you and your group decide to become pirates, that's great. Knock yourself out. But keep in mind there are inherent dangers besides folks trying to defend their stuff. The inherent dangers are many on the ocean, so just keep that in mind.
Pub crawlers. For those of you who don't know what a pub crawler is, it's a person who hangs out in a bar, tavern crawler, tavern patron, as it were. And invariably, in most role-playing games, taverns, saloons, bars, whatever, that's where the players will end up. Why? There's a good reason. In many role-playing games, taverns are the center of all action in a town. You can go in the Old West, they had saloons. In medieval sword and sorcery, they had taverns and inns. In modern era games, there's clubs, bars, pubs, whatever. But in any game you're playing, whatever the era, people like to congregate where they can socialize. And where do people socialize? Taverns, clubs, bars. And there's some advantages to that. There's a reason for it. It's not, you don't just go there to get drunk in a game. You go there for a reason. In Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, taverns and inns are one of the very first places travelers go when they enter a town or a city. And there's a reason for that. They get rooms to stay in. There's stables for the horses and other animals and things. They get food and drink. They can hear information and get rumors from the locals about possibly, if they're on a mission, they can stop in and listen for some local lore. If they're between jobs, they can stop in there and get job offers. And plus, we have socializing. One of the things about Dungeons & Dragons is, I don't care what game you're in, I don't care who you're playing with, at some point, if you're playing with your friends, one of your friends likes to get laid. There's no nice way to say that, and in a game, he's going to try to do that no matter what. And bars allow that to happen. He can go off and do his thing with the lovely little tavern wench, or whatever her name is, whoever she is. You know, he's off doing his thing, and the rest of the party can concentrate on the job offers and listening for information or whatever, you know. Now, there's a problem with that, as happens in modern bars as well. There are typical problems that come when you enter a tavern. As a dungeon master, taverns are brilliant because thieves can try to rob the players. Players come away from a mission with tons of gold, and it's falling out of their pockets or whatever, and thieves are like, that kind of thing. It's a great way to keep players from getting too wealthy, because if a player becomes uber rich, what's the point in adventuring? You see what I'm saying? So you have to kind of keep them poor from time to time. I played in a game one time, just here recently, as a matter of fact. We were jumping from point A to point B on these pedestals, and below was acid. We were getting in the course of the dungeon crawl, and we slipped and fell in, and we lost just virtually everything. Yeah, we was broke. We had no gear. We had nothing. It was ridiculous. And that's a great way for the game master to create a little side adventure where they have to find more money and get more gear and blah, 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 blah. It creates more role-playing opportunities. So it's not just to be mean to the characters. It's, it's part of the game. And plus, if your character has all that he needs, what's the point in adventuring? Like I said before. In a bar, a lot of times you run into people you know and don't like. Foes, foe men, foe women, foe monsters, foes in general. And of course, they will try to kill you. And you've got to watch out for that kind of thing. it may be somebody you don't know that's been hired to try to kill you by somebody you don't like or that doesn't like you. I mean, the possibilities for conflict in a bar of a deadly variety, of serious, variety, are endless. You can. I mean, anything. Anytime you're on an adventure, somebody somewhere wants you to fail that adventure, even if it's the bad guy, and he'll send assassins to try to kill you at the tavern. It's happened before. It'll happen again. The other part of this, and this is notorious in taverns, in Dungeons and Dragons, the obligatory bar fight over nothing or anything, or you never know. A tavern fight will start, and of course the players have to get in there and get their licks, and somebody will get their butt whooped, and blah 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 blah. Somebody gets dragged out the back by their buddy as the guards are coming in the front. I just, it's always something, and it's all fun. Anytime there's a tavern involved in a game, it's always fun. Lately, in the last decade or so, players that I play with have gotten smart, and they'll go in, get the room, and go right up to the room, buy ale or whatever, and take it up to their room and stay there. Avoid all that stuff. But that's okay, because that's where the thieves can break into the room through the window, or pick the lock on the door, whatever. There's ways. A crafty DM can always find ways to relieve players of their hard-earned gold. But taverns are awesome. They really are. They're the center of most towns socializing, because they didn't have no TV, and what else was there to do but sit around and pound down a few ales and dance with the barmaid and listen to some minstrels playing music. It's all there.